Welcome to the 5th episode of our newest show, The World Simplified. I'm Tharun, and each week on this show, I break down some of the biggest stories in finance and economics that are changing the world around us. Today, I want to talk about two huge trends that you might not notice in your daily life, but that impact everything from the phone in your hand to the prices you pay and even how countries interact with each other. First, we'll look at semiconductors. Think of them as the hidden engines behind our modern world. These tiny chips are in everything, and right now there's a major battle over who gets to control them, especially between the US and China. What's at stake? Pretty much the future of tech itself. Then we'll talk about BRICS, a coalition of countries that are tired of Western countries calling the shots in global finance. This group now includes some of the world's biggest economies and is aiming to create a financial system that doesn't revolve around the dollar. But can they actually pull it off, or is it all just talk? In short, today we are breaking down two of the most important power struggles of our time, and by the end, you'll see why these stories could shape the future for all of us. As always, we'd love to hear your feedback in the comments below. Trust me, we read every single one of them. Let's start with a question. What's the most essential piece of technology in your life? You might think of your smartphone, laptop, or car. But what if I told you that hidden inside all of those devices, there's something far more important, tiny, powerful chip called a semiconductor. These tiny chips are in everything, from the smartphones in your pocket to the car in your driveway, from the data centers that keep the internet running to the supercomputers making new discoveries in AI. Semiconductors are the unseen engines behind modern life. But now, these tiny chips are also at the heart of a big rivalry between the world's two largest economies, the US and China. This story combines technology, global politics, innovation, and economic power. And it's a story that could shape the future of our world. So get ready as I explore the journey of semiconductors, from their beginnings in the Cold War to today's race for technological dominance, and see what could happen if the careful balance of global chip production is disrupted. Let's start with the basics. What exactly are semiconductors and why are they so important? Imagine you want to control the flow of electricity, like turning it on or off, or even controlling how much of it flows through. Semiconductors are materials that can do this job. They're not exactly like copper, which easily conducts electricity, and not like rubber, which blocks it completely. Semiconductors are in the middle, so they can control electrical signals very precisely. This ability allows us to build switches, which are essential for computers. They're what let computers process information and make decisions. The story of semiconductors began in 1947 at Bell Labs, where the first transistor was invented. A transistor is a tiny switch that controls the flow of electricity in electronic devices. Computers are made up of millions of these transistors, much like our brains are made up of billions of neurons. Before transistors, computers were these large, clunky machines filled with vacuum tubes which were inefficient, unreliable, and often as big as a room. The invention of transistors changed everything. It replaced these vacuum tubes and allowed for smaller, faster, and more reliable computers. Then in 1958, the first integrated circuit was invented by Jack Kilby at Texas Instruments, putting multiple transistors on a single silicon wafer. This invention laid the foundation for modern computers. But semiconductors weren't just important for things like TVs and radios. During the Cold War, semiconductor technology became crucial for national security. The US government realized that having stronger computing power could give them an edge in areas like missile guidance, radar, and even space exploration. Integrated circuits, or small circuits with many transistors, were used in the Apollo mission that took humans to the moon in 1969 and in the guidance systems of intercontinental ballistic missiles. The competition between the US and the Soviet Union led to huge government funding, which sped up progress in the semiconductor industry. By the early 1960s, semiconductor development started growing extremely fast. In 1965, Gordon Moore, one of the co-founders of Intel, predicted that the number of transistors on a chip would double about every 2 years, while the cost of computing would drop. He was more accurate than he realized. This idea became known as Moore's Law and stayed true for the next 60 years. It not only predicted the rapid increase in computing power, but also became a guiding rule for the semiconductor industry. Fast forward to today, and semiconductors are the brains behind almost every piece of modern technology. They power your smartphones, control the complex systems in cars, make AI models possible for industries, and are essential for defense technologies like self-operating drones and satellite surveillance. Semiconductors are not just tech parts. They are the foundation of economic strength, national security, and military power. That's why they're so important and why they're at the center of a global competition. So how are semiconductors made? Well, the process is both a marvel of modern science and a feat of industrial precision, a combination of chemistry, physics, and engineering that spans the globe. It all starts with silicon, one of the most common elements on Earth. Silicon is taken from quartz sand and purified to an incredibly high level, to be precise, 99.999%. It's then melted, cooled into large cylinders called ingots, and sliced into very thin discs called wafers. Each wafer will eventually hold hundreds or even thousands of individual chips. The next step is where it gets really detailed. Photolithography. Imagine trying to draw a very complex circuit on a wafer, but at an extremely tiny scale measured in nanometers. For this, ultraviolet light is used in a process called EUV or extreme ultraviolet lithography. Light passes through a mask, like a stencil, onto the wafer, creating billions of tiny transistors that act like switches. This process is so precise that each detail on the wafer is smaller than a single red blood cell. The machines that do this are called EUV lithography machines, and they are made by ASML, which is a company in the Netherlands. Each of these machines costs around $200 million, has over 1 lakh parts, and takes years to put together. These machines are not just costly, they are essential. Without them, it's impossible to make the world's most advanced chips, the chips used in AI smartphones and high-tech military equipment. After photolithography, the wafers go through several more steps like etching, doping, and layering to build multiple levels of circuits that connect with each other. Each of these steps happen in a clean room, an area that's 10,000 times cleaner than a hospital operating room, because even a tiny speck of dust can destroy a wafer worth millions. Finally, the wafers are cut into individual chips, tested, and packaged. It's a months-long process that involves thousands of people and facilities across different countries. This brings us to the core of the story. Why are semiconductors so important in the rivalry between US and China? To understand this, we need to see what semiconductors really mean. They're not just parts in our gadget, they are the base of technological power. Whoever controls semiconductor controls the future of AI, defense, and economic strength. The US has led semiconductor innovation for decades, with companies like Intel, Texas Instruments, and Qualcomm advancing chip technology. But China has also realized how crucial semiconductors are and has invested heavily to catch up. Through the Made in China 2025 plan, China has aimed to be self-sufficient in making semiconductors. Since 2014, China has spent billions, around $47 billion, through a program called the Big Fund to boost its own chip manufacturing. However, China faces a big problem. It can't make the most advanced chips. Chips at 5 nanometer or below require EUV lithography machines, which only ASML in the Netherlands makes. The US has pressured ASML and its allies to stop selling these machines to China, blocking China's access to the technology needed to produce the world's most advanced chips. To make things more complicated, the US has put strict export rules on Chinese companies like Huawei and ZTE, stopping them from getting the latest chips. These companies were set to lead in building 5G networks worldwide, but these US restrictions have slowed them down a lot. This isn't just about business. These chips are also used in military systems and surveillance technologies, which is why the US sees this as a national security issue. To respond, China has turned to espionage and innovation in less advanced technology areas. Reports say China uses different methods, from government-backed hacking to using its citizens abroad to try to get semiconductor technology. Despite these efforts, China is still behind in making advanced chips. The best Chinese factories can produce chips at 28 nanometer, which is far behind the cutting-edge chips made by companies like TSMC and Samsung. Now, let's talk about TSMC, the company at the center of the global semiconductor supply chain, and how its rise fits into the bigger story. In the early days of semiconductors, companies like Intel would design and manufacture their own chips. But as technology got more complex, making chips became extremely expensive. This led to the rise of the Fabless model. In this model, companies like Apple, Qualcomm, and Nvidia focus only on designing chips and leave the manufacturing to foundries like TSMC. This specialization allowed TSMC to become incredibly skilled at just one thing: making chips. Founded in 1987 with the help from the Taiwanese government, TSMC has grown to dominate the market. Today, 90% of the world's most advanced processors are made by TSMC in Taiwan. So what makes TSMC so powerful? It's their ability to produce the most advanced chips, those at 5 nanometer and 3 nanometer levels at a scale no other company can match. Samsung in South Korea is the only other company that comes close, but even they don't have TSMC's expertise in these advanced chips. This makes TSMC and Taiwan a key part of the global tech supply chain, making Taiwan's stability important for the whole world. This brings us to one of the biggest what-ifs in the global politics today. What if China were to invade Taiwan? Taiwan is the center of global semiconductor production. Taiwan is not just a place with factories. This includes highly skilled workers, a network of specialized suppliers, and infrastructure that provides everything from precision tools to materials. While other countries are trying to build similar facilities, recreating this ecosystem from scratch is extremely difficult. If China were to invade Taiwan, this entire ecosystem would be at risk. The impact of an invasion would be huge. Think about what happened in 2021 with the chip shortage. Car production stopped, consumer electronics were hard to find, and the global economy lost around $240 billion in GDP. Now imagine that situation, but on an even larger scale. The disruption wouldn't just affect gadgets, it would impact national defense, medical equipment, communications, and essential infrastructure worldwide. This is why the US and its allies are working to spread out semiconductor production by investing in new facilities in places like US, Japan, and South Korea. The US is helping TSMC build new factories in Arizona with a $12 billion project to reduce reliance on Taiwan. But building new semiconductor plants takes time, typically 3 to 5 years, and costs a lot of money. Until these new facilities are ready, the global tech industry will still heavily depend on Taiwan. Another major reason semiconductors are so important is because of their role in AI. Advanced AI needs huge amounts of computing power, which comes from specialized chips like GPUs. Right now, Nvidia is the top company in AI chips, and these chips are made by TSMC. AI isn't just about making smartphones smarter, it's about transforming industries, building autonomous military technology, and strengthening cybersecurity. The US understands how important AI is for future dominance, so it has restricted the sale of these powerful GPUs to China. Without these chips, China's goal to lead in AI are held back. This is a careful strategy to limit China's strength in AI-driven military and economic technology. China, however, is investing heavily to create its own versions of these chips, but they are still behind. The most advanced AI chips need very tiny transistors, down to 5 nanometer or even 3 nanometer. Since China can't produce these advanced chips domestically yet, it faces a major disadvantage in the AI race. The global race for semiconductor leadership is in full swing, and it's a race worth hundreds of billions of dollars. The US CHIPS Act is putting $52 billion into increasing US chip production, while South Korea plans to invest $450 billion by 2030 to build up its own semiconductor industry. Japan has also introduced big incentives to become a key player in chip manufacturing again. Meanwhile, China is moving quickly, with 28 new fabs expected to be ready by 2025. However, most of these factories will make older, less advanced types of chips. This means that while China is boosting its production of basic chips used in things like appliances and cars, it still doesn't have the technology to produce the most advanced chips needed for AI and other high-tech industries. The European Union has also entered the race, aiming to produce 20% of the world's semiconductors by 2030. This includes partnership with companies like Intel to build factories in Europe, showing that semiconductors are important not only for technology, but also for economic stability and national security. Now, before I wrap up the story, let's look at some fun facts and some numbers to understand how crucial semiconductors are. During the chip shortage of 2021, the global auto industry lost an estimated $210 billion in revenue, and 6 million fewer vehicles were produced worldwide because of a lack of chips. India also felt the impact. Car manufacturers couldn't meet the demand for new vehicles for years, and prices for new cars rose by 50% in just 5 years. These chips aren't luxury items. They are essential, and their shortage slowed down an entire industry. Building TSMC's most advanced semiconductor factories cost over $20 billion each, and each EUV lithography machines, the one needed to make the world's most advanced chips, cost $200 million. These machines are so complex that putting one together requires tens of thousands of parts from a global network of highly specialized suppliers. As we've seen, semiconductors are more than just components in our gadgets. They are symbols of power, innovation, and national pride. The fight to control chip technology is about more than business. It's about who gets to shape the future. And right now, the outcome of this battle could affect everything from our personal tech to global security. If the delicate balance of global chip production shifts, the consequences will be felt worldwide. But while the US and China square off over technology, there's another story playing out. This one in the world of finance. Imagine a coalition of countries that feel left out of the current global financial system and want to create a new one that doesn't revolve around the US dollar or the rules set by the West. That's where BRICS comes in. In October 2024, something unusual happened in Kazan, Russia. Vladimir Putin, a leader of a country that has been cut off from the global financial system, hosted a summit that directly challenged the global influence of the US. Sitting with him were leaders from countries that together make up nearly half of the world's population. This group wanted to find new ways to do business and trade, separate from the Western-dominated financial systems. This wasn't just another international meeting. It was the first gathering of an expanded BRICS group, and it showed a growing split in how the world's economy is organized. Let's start by understanding what BRICS represents today. It includes 45% of the world's population, 35% of global economy, and produces 40% of the world's oil. But what really stands out is that BRICS represents a growing frustration with the global financial system, which many believe is set up to benefit Western countries more than others. The journey of BRICS from an investment term to a major global alliance happened over time. In 2001, an economist from Goldman Sachs, Jim O'Neill, came up with BRIC to describe 4 fast-growing economies: Brazil, Russia, India, and China. But after the 2008 global financial crisis, these countries turned BRIC into a real group to push back against Western control of the economy. South Africa joined in 2010, making it BRICS. In 2024, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the UAE joined BRICS, motivated by a strong desire to reduce Western control over the global economy, a push that sped up due to the effects of Russian-Ukraine war. This expansion highlighted BRICS' aim to change the balance of economic power. To understand why BRICS matters, let's compare it to the Western-led organizations like the IMF and the World Bank. In these organizations, voting power depends on how much money each country contributes. This setup gives the US and European countries a lot of control. For example, the US has 16.5% of voting power in the IMF, which is enough to block major decisions. Now, look at the BRICS New Development Bank. Here, all founding members have equal voting rights, no matter how big or small they are. The G7, which includes the US, UK, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and Canada, has a more formal structure with the US taking a lead role. BRICS, on the other hand, is set up differently. It's less formal, decisions are made by agreement, and leadership changes every year. While the G7 often pushes for similar policies across countries, BRICS focuses on respecting each country's independence and avoiding interference in each other's affairs. This brings us to the internal conflicts within BRICS, which can make it seem less united compared to its Western counterparts. Take the rivalry between China and India, for example. These two countries have serious border disputes that even turned violent in 2020. They are also competing for influence across Asia, and their economic systems are very different. India follows democratic capitalism, while China has a state-controlled system. Yet, despite these differences, they are expected to work together to change the global financial system. The Middle East adds another layer of challenge. Iran and the UAE, both new BRICS members, have very different views on regional security. Iran's nuclear program causes tension, while the UAE has close military ties with the US, which is the country Iran sees as its main rival. Ethiopia and Egypt, new members of BRICS, have a serious conflict over sharing the Nile's water. Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam project has caused major tension between these two African countries. Even among the original BRICS members, there are big differences. Brazil's democratic values don't match with the more complicated authoritarian systems of China and Russia. South Africa's economy is still very connected with Western countries, even as it tries to show support for BRICS. And Russia's invasion of Ukraine has created uncomfortable situations as other BRICS members try to stay neutral while doing business with Russia. Despite these differences, BRICS has made real progress in building its own alternatives to Western institutions. The BRICS New Development Bank has already funded 96 projects totaling $32.8 billion. The Contingent Reserve Arrangement offers $100 billion in emergency funds without the strict conditions that the Western loans often have. trade between BRICS members is also starting to use their local currencies. For example, trade between Russia and China in dollars dropped from 90% in 2015 to just 20% by 2023. At the Kazan summit, BRICS announced BRICS Pay, a new system to replace SWIFT for international payments. By the way, if you're wondering what SWIFT is, we've spoken about SWIFT in detail here. China's cross-border interbank payment system, or CIPS, is already processing over $50 billion daily. BRICS countries are also reducing their dollar reserves and now hold more gold together than the US does. But replacing the dollar is much harder than it seems. The dollar's dominance isn't just because of America's power. It's built on some strong advantages that are tough to match. First, the US financial markets are incredibly deep and stable. The US Treasury market alone is worth over $24 trillion and offers a safe, reliable asset that global investors and central banks depend on. No other market in the world can match this size and stability. Second, the dollar has what economists call network effects. The more people use the dollar, the more valuable it becomes. It's like a language. People learn English not because it's the best, but because everyone else speaks it. Today, the dollar is used in over 80% of international trade transactions. Third, there's the legal and financial structure behind the dollar. The US has highly developed financial markets, strong property rights, and an independent legal system. When there are issues with dollar transactions, there's a clear legal process to handle them. Building this level of trust takes decades. Look at China's attempt to make the yuan more global. Even though China is the world's second largest economy, the yuan only makes up 2.5% of global payments. Why? Because China has strict controls on money leaving the country and its financial markets aren't fully open to foreign investors. India has similar issues with the rupee. Even when BRICS countries try to trade in their own currencies, they face practical challenges. For example, if Brazil trades with South Africa, they need to decide on which currency to use, manage exchange rate risks, and find banks to handle the transaction. Let's say Brazil sells something to South Africa and it is paid in South African rand. It can only use the rand to buy something South Africa makes or somehow find another country that's willing to accept the rand. Using the dollar avoids these problems because there's already a large stable market for exchanging dollars. Even the BRICS bank set up to reduce dependence on the dollar still does most of its business in dollars. Only 30% of its loans are in local currencies. This shows how hard it is to operate without the dollar even for banks aiming to do so. Russia's experience with the Western sanctions also highlights this issue. Even though Russia is cut off from much of the dollar-based financial system, it still prices most of its oil exports in dollars even when selling to China. The global oil market is just too connected to the dollar to easily switch. But dollar dependence isn't the only challenge. The BRICS Bank's $32.8 billion in approved projects is small compared to the World Bank, which commits around $117.5 billion each year. BRICS payment systems are also fragmented. There isn't one united system to replace SWIFT. Some BRICS members want a common currency, but this would require a high level of cooperation, which seems highly unlikely given their political differences. At a basic level, many BRICS members don't actually want to completely leave the Western system. India has important security partnerships with the US. Brazil relies a lot on trade with Western countries. The UAE hosts large US military bases. Even China, though it competes with the West, is still deeply connected to the Western economies. Expanding to BRICS Plus also brings new challenges. Making decisions was already tough with 5 members. Now with 9, it's even more complex. Each new member has its own priorities and issues. The group now has to balance different interests across 3 continents while keeping everyone in agreement. So, where is BRICS headed? The truth is, BRICS isn't even trying to replace the Western-led system, but is instead building a parallel one. We're moving toward a world where there are competing financial systems. Countries might use SWIFT for some transactions and BRICS Pay for others. They might borrow from the World Bank or the New Development Bank. They could hold reserves in dollars, euros, and yuan. This complexity brings both opportunities and risk. For developing countries, it means more options for funding and trade. For Western countries, it means they might have less power to use financial pressure as a way to influence others. For businesses, it means they'll need to work with different systems and standards. One thing is clear, the economic system created after the World War II, which was centered on American financial power, is now facing its biggest challenge yet. Whether or not BRICS succeeds in creating a complete alternative, the changes it's making will shape the global economy for years to come. And that's it for today. I'll see you in the next one.